Thanks for watching Afternoon Live. We spend thousands of hours at work each year, so it's no wonder that it takes on great importance in our lives. But what happens when your work becomes your identity and then that work goes away through a job loss or even retirement? Here with advice on navigating these life changes, we welcome psychologist Dr. Janna Koretz. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this.
So let's talk about a big word first, enmeshment, this career identity enmeshment. How do you identify it and kind of figure out when it starts to become an unhealthy situation?
Yeah, so we have spent a long time as psychologists talking about enmeshment and how that applies to two people in a relationship, but it also can apply to a person in their job. So this is when, someone spends so much time at work and spends, all of their efforts in that way, and the line between work and self becomes blurred. And so their whole identity becomes just their work and nothing else. And that can be a really big problem over time because it can lead to, like you said, when things happen, people lose their jobs, their companies are acquired, they miss a promotion. It can lead to a lot of problems around, depression, anxiety, substance use, as well as like interpersonal conflicts and family conflicts at home.
Are there ways to, maybe questions to ask yourself to kind of figure out if you're beginning to cross that line?
Yeah, I have three really important questions I tell my clients all the time, or we all do it at my practice. So the first is, how do you describe yourself? And certainly we all touch upon our job when we meet people at parties and other places. But is there anything else you include? Do you talk about your family, hobbies, or things you used to like to do, travel you've done, anything else? Or is it all about work? The second is how much time you spend thinking about work, because we all spend time thinking about work, but when we are easily distracted by work when we're in other environments, if we're interested in only thinking about work, if we sort of, it keeps us up at night, that's an important thing to think about. And then sort of, as we discussed, how would you feel right in this moment if you lost your job? Like, what would that feel like to you really deeply? And, how would that spin you out?
Yeah, that's a really tough question to think about, especially if you are super, super invested. So if you do feel like maybe you're overly invested, are there certain steps that you can take to pull yourself back into the real world a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So the first one that I like to talk about all the time is rebuilding networks. And certainly that can apply to professional networks. How can you also apply to your skills, in other areas, and what are interesting things people are doing. But more importantly, it's your professional networks, because, we all have friends and people acquaintances, friends that we've known over time in different periods of our lives. And rebuilding those connections and fostering those relationships not only helps us feel connected, to other people, but also reminds us of what we used to be like in those times, and can help really ground us into and give us a starting place to sort of think about what it is that we like to do, who we used to be, what are other parts of our identity. So that's a really important one. The second one that I like to talk about too is really doing values work. A lot of people run into issues when their work or other things, the values of that don't really align with their personal values. And most people haven't had the luxury or permission really to think about what their personal values are over time. We kind of assume them of, our work culture, our greater culture around us, or sometimes, family of origin. But values change over time. And so to have a space to really think about what is important to me. And I think people tend to think this is a really easy task, but it's not, because, certainly we can all say like, oh yeah, family is important. That's a really important value to me. But what is it about the family? We need to extend that line of inquiry a little further, because the details really matter. Is it that you like to be a helper? Is it that you like to be around other people? What is it specifically? And kind of keep going down that path of inquiry so that you can really figure out what is important to me and how am I going to incorporate those facets into my life. And the last one that I give people they really don't like, to be honest, is that, change happens in small incremental steps that are consistent. I think when people want to try something new, it feels very black and white. Like, I'm going to try exercise, so I'm going to do a marathon. And that's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But real consistent change and trying out different hats and trying out what's comfortable for you and who you might be are really more about really small, like very boring, unsexy things all the time. And I always think back to one of my clients once said to me, so what you're saying is that I should put carrots in my lunch instead of chips. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying, figuratively and literally, those are the things that we're talking about. And I love that. So those are kind of the three things that we usually start with.
It's super relatable when you kind of break it down into a very day-by-day, step-by-step process. Like you said, you can't run a marathon tomorrow if you haven't really prepped for it.
Totally. Absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah. Likewise. Happy to be here anytime.
We'll have more information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Live right after this.